It is finally over. I have just finished my final exam this morning. Did take a quick nap before waking up at around 1:30 in the afternoon because that's my sleeping schedule right now, where I sleep incredibly late and wake up incredibly late. Except for today, I have to wake up at 9:30 to do a final exam. But at last, I don't have to worry about school until August. No more Zoom session to worry about until August time, and it's time for me to have more time of doing these video. And also, for those of you wondering why I haven't been uploading for the past week and I have only uploaded one video for the last 2 weeks, well, I already explained it on Twitter that this is finals week, and usually when it's finals week, I'm not going to be able to have time to do video because I'll be spending most of my time studying for those final exams. But that being said, I am glad that I'm back, and the first thing that I am going to do when I am back doing YouTube video is to talk about the review of the simulated match, which this week it's week number 12. And this week is also Heniken rivalry week, which means we have some of the biggest rivalry game that is going to be happening this week, which include El Trafico and the Cascadia derby. But we start off the first game with the rematch of the conference semifinal from last year in the East between NYCFC versus TFC. And this time it was NYCFC able to win 2-0 against Toronto in this game. Alexandro Matrita scored in the 29th minute to give NYCFC a 1-0 lead, but before Tajora Shradi pretty much put this game away in the 73rd minute, as NYCFC was able to get a little bit of revenge over Toronto after what happened last year when TFC knocked them out of the playoffs. And for TFC, yeah, the inconsistency just continues with this team, and you're going to see throughout this video where I'm going to be mentioning them again because they're playing twice this week. And by the way, there's going to be 14 games that I have to review this week. Another one of those reviews that I'm going to have to switch the board 3 times, and it's going to be relatively a long video to do. You're going to see that TFC is started to struggle, and that it's not just inconsistency that plagued them, but they're actually struggling in a point where there should be a little bit concern in terms of Toronto fans of how this team is going to perform from then on. But that being said, moving on into the next match is the game of the year. So besides the fact that we know that this week there are some of the biggest rivalry games, and I'm sure those games are going to get a lot of attention, I think this game probably should get as much attention to those rivalry game that's happening on Heniken rivalry week, because this is the game of the year. This has been a game that I've been wanted to see for a long time, because these are not only the top 2 team in the Western Conference, but they're the top 2 team in the league. And I don't think a lot of people thought that in the beginning of the year that Minnesota and RSL will be the top 2 team in the league, but here we are. We have 2 teams battling each other to see who exactly is the best team in the league. And boy, this game did not disappoint in terms of action that has happened. DeMar Kralik scores for RSL to give them a early 1-0 lead, although it was relatively even from the get-go, and that it looked like both teams could score a couple more goals, and that it looked like this game could be a high-scoring action. Then, 7 minutes into the second half, it's the red-hot Kevin Molino gets the equalizer for Minnesota before Ethan Finley scored 15 minutes later to give the Loons a 2-1 lead. Amaria then make it 3-1 in favor of Minnesota in the 77th minute before RSL did get a response after they concede 3 unanswered goals from Tate Schmidt, who I believe this is his first ever goal in MLS history. Very young, talented RSL player coming out of the academy, able to get one back for RSL and set up a grandstand finish. And boy, it was such a grandstand finish for the last 5 minutes of this game, because there was chances on both, and this game could have easily had either a 4th goal for Minnesota, or this could have ended in a 3-3 tie between the Loons and RSL. But unfortunately, that was not meant to be, and the Loons, thankfully for them, they were able to hang on in this game and continue to show why they are not only the best team in the league, but they're basically this year's version of LAFC from last year. I mean, they're just untouchable right now, and that if you will see the standings right near the end of the video, you're going to see how much of a lead that they have over the second place team in the Western Conference, and in general, in terms of the supporter shield standing. Like, they're just a mile away from where everybody is, and I just think for the Loons, this is going to be that year where it's a special year for them, and that, you know, unless if they started to struggle a little bit, which I'm assuming eventually they're going to do, because it's already impressive, the fact that they have got 35 points and they're still unbeaten throughout 12 weeks. Like last year when LAFC won the Supporters Shield and had that impressive year, they didn't go undefeated for 15 weeks. Like they suffered their first loss just 6 weeks into the season. So the fact that Minnesota, with the way that they are getting points, they are right there on the record, and that we could, for the third week in a row in this virtual simulation world, to see the overall tally of the total points in MLS broken yet again this year. But yeah, moving on into the next match is the Quakes. Boy, this was a heartbreaker for the Quakes. I mean, I feel like this was probably the best game that the Quakes have played throughout the season against Seattle, but yet they weren't able to pull out with a victory, although it did look promising early in this game. 10 minutes into the game, Andy Rios gave the Quakes a 1-0 lead before he doubled the lead just 9 minutes later to give the Quakes a 2-0 lead. And it looked like Seattle basically is going to suffer a shocking loss, but at the same time, they looked like they were pretty much fell into the trap game known as this one, since in the upcoming weekend they play that big Cascadia showdown between them and the Portland Timbers. But then Ruidíaz get one back for Seattle in the 35th minute, and this one was kind of against the run of plays because the Quakes were by far the better team in this game. Morris then scored in the 66th minute to tie the game up at 2 apiece before Nicholas Ladero broke the hearts at the Quakes Stadium as he was able to score the third and winning goal for Seattle in this game. And in the end, the Sounders were able to get a 3-2 win against the Quakes. And yeah, again, you know, I really think this was the best performance that the Quakes play. And if you, I know they ultimately blew a 2-0 lead in this game and wasn't able to get the result, but if they can continue to play like this is kind of some of the effort that I would want to see this team, and that, you know, in if they play like this against any other opponent, and maybe they can like short up their defense a little bit in the end, this team could definitely bounce back and start it to maybe get some resort. I mean, I know it's very hard to say with this team because, you know, it's hard to say to a Quakes team that, you know, whenever they get, you think that they were able to get a resort and they started to play very well, next thing you know, they just fade away to the abyss. So we'll see how it's going to go, and that, you know, for Seattle, it's a good win for them, but they did not play well at all in this game, and that at least they avoided the dreaded trap in this game against the Quakes. But yeah, moving on, in the next match is the second 0-0 draw that I get to report in terms of all these simulated match review. And this one, I had a feeling this could be a 0-0 draw, because knowing the fact that Montreal is a team that loves the defense, and they definitely defended a lot against a Chicago team that had a lot of chances to get a goal in this game, but they weren't very clinical. It did end in a 0-0 draw, and I guess, I don't know if anybody's going to be satisfied with this. I mean, the Impact, I guess they'll be satisfied with the fact that they got a clean sheet, which is something that they haven't done in a long time. And for the Fire, I guess they got a point out on the road, but at the same time, they'll be frustrating the fact that they were definitely by far the better team in this game, and that if they only put away one of their chances, they would have got all 3 points against the Impact. And obviously the Impact are not going to be happy with this because they didn't score a goal and they dropped point at home. And anytime when you drop point at home, it's definitely not a good result. But yeah, moving on in terms of the next match is the Red Bulls and Atlanta. And boy, these two teams, there's a reason why these two teams do not like each other, and that I really think this is one of the better rivalry in MLS, because there was definitely some feisty things that happened in this game. And it happened early, where there was a couple of scuffle, and then Tim Parker decided that he was going to amp up this rivalry fever to a maximum by decided to put a 2-feet scissor tackle on Pity Martinez that almost resort into a leg breaker. No doubt about the fact that that is a red card, and after that it actually kind of triggered a huge massive scrum between both of the player, and I was surprised that Tim Parker was the only one that got sent off in this game, because I swear that I did see some punches that was thrown in that little mini scuffle, but the referee did hand it a bunch of yellow card, but only Tim Parker was the one that got sent off, because again, he put just an ugly 2-feet scissors tackle that could have easily not only be a end of the season for Pity Martinez, that his legs would be broken, but it could have been a career-ending injury with how ugly that tackle was. But speaking of Pity Martinez, he kind of would get the last laugh in terms of that incident, because he would score in the 53rd minute to give Atlanta a 1-0 lead. Sean Davis did get the equalizer from the Red Bulls from a corner, but Pity Martinez, he would score again in the 66th minute to retake the lead for Atlanta, as in the end, Atlanta was able to win this very feisty game between both of these teams. And yeah, I can't wait until the next time they meet. Like, this is kind of something that I always say about Atlanta versus the Red Bulls. Whenever they have like a feisty moment, or there's some crazy things that happen at the end, I just cannot wait until the next match, because that's how heated this rivalry is, with the way that both teams just clearly do not like each other whatsoever. But yeah, moving on, in terms of the next match, is also one of the more interesting rivalry, and some would say that this is probably the best rivalry right now in MLS, which is El Trafico between LAFC versus the Galaxy. And as it is the case for El Trafico, except for last year in the playoffs, when LAFC finally broke that duck of able to beat the Galaxy in an El Trafico match in the playoffs, this time it wasn't going to be the case, as the Galaxy was able to win 2-1 on the road against LAFC. And if you were a player that haven't scored a goal in a long time and want to break the duck, this was a game for you, because there were a couple of goals scored in this game that hasn't scored a lot of goals, but they finally broke their duck in this El Trafico. And speaking of which, one of those players is Brian Rodriguez, who hasn't scored in a while and considered one of the biggest flop for LAFC. Finally scored in the 13th minute to give them a 1-0 lead. Jonathan Dos Santos did equalize in the 33rd minute. Before in the 45th minute, and right on the stroke of halftime, guess who scored the goal for the Galaxy? That's right, Chicharito scores for the Galaxy to give them a 2-1 win. I mean, it's been a while since Chicharito has scored, and I guess some of the Galaxy fans and maybe the Mexican media can forgive Chicharito in this, because, you know, he scored in the biggest moment, and also he scored the winning goal in this El Trafico game. So yeah, he of course gave the Galaxy a 2-1 lead. LAFC fans are a little bit upset about this goal, because they thought that this goal will happen 35 seconds after the minimum of stoppage time was allowed, and that the referee should have blown the whistle. But then again, when I look back at this, the Galaxy was on an attack, and there is just no way in the world, whenever a team goes on the attack, and this is also why I explained last week, where just because we play a little bit over the minimum of stoppage time doesn't mean the referee has to blow it right on the stroke of that stoppage time that is announced. If there is an attack that is developing, then the referee are going to let's see what happened before blowing when that attack is going to come to an end. And the Galaxy definitely, they were on an attack right as they hit the 3rd minute of stoppage time, and it's just kind of unfortunate the fact that they were on an attack so much that I just feel like it would have been incredibly harsh if the referee would have blown the whistle when the Galaxy was on attack. I mean, they would be very upset the fact that the referee blow the whistle at half time when they were on an attack and looked like they were having a promising opportunity. But otherwise, in the second half, there wasn't really much that has happened in this game, which is kind of weird because usually this game there's a lot of action between both of this team. But in the end, the Galaxy, as I said, they were able to hold on to a 2-1 victory. And for LAFC, yeah, the struggle just continued. And you fought last week against the Quakes. They kind of turned a corner by getting a big win. No, they are still struggling right now. And they are becoming one of the most disappointing teams from this season. Nobody would have thought that this team is just hobbling right above the red line right now in the standings. Speaking of disappointing team, TFC is a team that I think there's definitely some disappointment after this match against FC Cincinnati, and there probably also are some panicking that might be going from the TFC fan base because, yeah, they got completely destroyed by FC Cincinnati in this game. Although they got off to a great start in the second minute when Alejandro Pozuelo was able to give them a 1-0 lead, but from then on, it was all FC Cincinnati. Yoya Kubo would score in the 10th minute to equalize for FC Cincinnati before Medunian give FC Cincinnati the lead in the 22nd minute. CM De Jong then make it 3-1 in favor of FC Cincinnati in the 63rd before Jurgen Lacadia, who's been one of the main goals scored of this team, and that I really think FC Cincinnati has found their lethal striker in their team in Jurgen Lacadia. Scores again in the 77th minute to add the cherry on the top for FC Cincinnati as FC Cincinnati completely blowing away TFC in this game. And if you're Toronto, yeah, there's got to be some concern with the way that these last two games have not been very impressive. And even though I know just a couple of weeks ago they did get a 4-0 win against the Whitecaps, it was the Whitecaps. I mean, whenever you play the Whitecaps, and this is no disrespect to Vancouver, there are as an automatic 3 points as you're going to get. But when you're facing against real team and you struggle against them, yeah, there's definitely going to be some real concern with the way that the team is playing. But yeah, moving on in terms of the next match is DC and Orlando City. And boy, Orlando City is going to be frustrated about this result because they were definitely by far the better team in this game. And it looked like they got the victory wrapped up in the 73rd minute when Dom Duar finally put one into the back of the net after it looked like Orlando City was doing their classic thing of having a bunch of chances on the road and they weren't able to put one away. And they, of course, had a 1-0 lead at that point. But then in the 88th minute, Griffin Yao, who just came off the bench in this game and making a rare appearance for DC, scores his first ever goal in MLS history to tie the game up at 1 apiece. And in the end, it was a 1-1 draw between DC versus Orlando. And besides the fact that Orlando is going to be disappointed, the fact that they could have got a win in this game, they could have had an opportunity to go to the top of the Eastern Conference. Because later on, I will tell you that Philly actually lost their game, and that if Orlando City would have won against DC United, they would have be back at the top of the Eastern Conference. But that wasn't meant to be, as they fortunately had to settle a point against DC United, who I think DC will be happy the fact that they got a point out of this game, because it looked like for sure that they weren't going to get anything out of this one with the way that how the balance of this game plays. But that being said, I am now going to be moving on into the next game, but first I gotta also switch the board to look at the last 6 games that's going to be happening from this weekend's action. Alright, next up is NYCFC and the Rapids. So after NYCFC got that impressive victory against Toronto, unfortunately they weren't able to follow up in this game against the Rapids as they lost 2-1 against them. And it would be the Kai Kamara show that is the difference for the Rapids to getting all 3 points on the road, as he scored in the 21st minute on a header, and then he would score in the 42nd minute again on a header, nevertheless, to give Colorado a 2-0 lead. Keaton Parks did get NYCFC a goal back, and NYCFC did push to try to get the equalizer, but ultimately Colorado did a good job to hold on into this game as the Rapids get a big 3 points against an NYCFC team that has certainly seen some resurgence in the past couple of weeks and trying to chart up the table, but unfortunately their resurgence is kind of slowed down a little bit because the Rapids is a team that, although they have at times show a sign of inconsistency, they are still one of the better team in the Western Conference, and that this will definitely help their chances in terms of rising up the Western Conference table. But yeah, moving on, in terms of the next match, it's finally happened. Columbus have finally won a game. And it's been a while since I have been able to say that, because the Crew has been just on such a miserable winless run that it sounds very similar to what happened last year, where they got off to a great start and everything fell apart. But finally, in this game, they at least gave their fans something to cheer as they finally end that winless streak by winning 3-2 against the Refs. And did I say earlier that they were on an unbeaten streak? My apologies to that. They were actually on a winless run ever since when the whole sports world was shut down, and we had to go into this alternative timeline where we're basically just having like virtual simulation match that determine these games. Jerzy Zardes gets the scoring in the 18 minutes started, with Columbus at that point having a 1-0 lead. Then Artur would double that lead in the 26th minute to give Columbus a 2-0 lead, before Theo Bunbury would score a brace in the second half, first in the 54th minute, then in the 76th minute to tie the game up at 2 apiece. And I'm pretty sure Cruz fan, knowing that, oh no, here we go again, we're probably not going to win again, and that this winless run is not going to end, and that it's just going to continue. But thankfully, that winless run was finally going to come to an end, because in the 81st minute, Lucas Zalarian, who has been one of the more disappointing signing of this season, was able to score in this game to get the winner for Columbus. As in the end, as I said, Columbus finally broke the duck and finally ended the winless run that they had going all the way back to March. And yeah, hopefully with this win they can maybe get something going, although, you know, that there's still a long I mean, the good thing about Columbus is that they're in the Eastern Conference, and I know I keep saying this, but it is true. When you look at the standings wise, if you're a team in the Eastern Conference, even if you're the worst team in the Eastern Conference, you shouldn't give up hope yet, because the Eastern Conference, the standings is still kind of a clusterfuck between third place all the way down to dead last in the Eastern Conference standings. So yeah, for Columbus, yes, they endure a long spell of not getting a win, but if they can get something going and can do something that some of these teams that has been pretty bad throughout this season can do, and get some winning streak going, they can definitely charge themselves up and go above the red line, and that's despite the fact that they haven't won a game in almost 2 months' time. So yeah, we shall see whether or not if that is going to happen. Which, speaking of which, one team that I mentioned before that had a bad run, but all of a sudden are just winning games left and right, and are just smoking hot right now, is Sporting KC. I mean, remember those times when Sporting KC was struggling and they were near the bottom of the Western Conference, and I guess Peter Vermees probably had a team meeting and just really got into his teams. Yeah, it seemed like that team meeting clearly works, because ever since they have been looking like one of the most unstoppable force in the league. And they continue that by getting a huge 3-1 victory against another team that has been red hot this season, which is the Philadelphia Union, who was at the top of the Eastern Conference. Roger Espinoza would get the goal scoring started for SKC in the 34th minute, before Johnny Russell would score in the 52nd minute to double that lead. Raymond Gaddis unfortunately scored an own goal and become only one of the few victims of this simulated virtual world to score an own goal. I mean, we haven't seen a lot of own goals in these simulated match, which was kind of a little bit interesting, but we did see one here, and at that point, it was 3-0 against SKC, and you knew that was over. I mean, as soon as SKC gets a 3-0 lead, as good as the Union is, I just don't see how they were going to come back in this. They did get one back in the 90th minute from Sergio Santos, but that was more of a consolation goal. As Sporting KC, another big victory and another step of them charging up the table, and I'm pretty sure they are giving a lot of caution to those Western Conference teams that is kind of being a little bit inconsistent, and that since they are now on a red hot streak as they are, I won't be surprised in a couple of weeks if they continue this. They're going to be right up there in the top of the Western Conference like they did earlier this season. But that being said, moving on into the next match is the Texas Derby. And as it is the case, if you don't include last year, the Texas Derby usually ends in a draw. And it was the case in this one as it ends in a 2-2 draw. Bonet Garcia would score in the 36th minute before Brian Acosta probably scored the goal of the year by putting an absolute screamer from 44 yards out to tie the game up at 1 apiece in this game. Although, that being said, that goal is going to be, it will be interesting how that goal is going to compare to the one that Jacob Ginso scored against LAFC earlier this season, because that one was also an absolute rocket too. So it'll be interesting to see how both of those goals is going to go, and maybe one of those are going to be winning goal of the year this season. Bonet Garcia then scored again for Houston in the 66th minute, but Santiago Mosquera would tie the game up in the 81st minute, and that's how this game ends, as it ends in a 2-2 draw between Dallas and Houston. Another draw in the Texas Derby, and I guess, you know, if you're Houston, you'll be happy the fact that you got a point against your hated rival after what happened last year when they just got absolutely blown out of the window by Dallas and lost 5-1 in that match. And for Dallas, they'll be frustrated the fact that they weren't able to have some continue that success that they had last year, which is completely dominate Houston, and that they're one of those teams that is kind of a little bit inconsistent in the Western Conference, and therefore that's why they are kind of stuck right in that mediocre range in the Western Conference table. But that being said, moving on into the next match is the Quakes. So you know how earlier in this video I said that, you know, if the Quakes can do what they did against Seattle, they are going to eventually find that luck, and eventually they're going to win again. And Lord and behold, against RSL in this game, they did exactly what they did, and they almost felt like they listened to what I said about how if they can continue to play like this, they're going to win the game. Because in this one, they did exactly what they did against Seattle, play very well in this game. And although they had to really work for it, because this game turned out to be an absolute barn burner, especially in the last 15 minutes of this game, they were able to come up with a big upset against RSL, and probably the biggest upset for this week. Vlaco would score right on the stroke of halftime to give the Quakes a 1-0 lead before Tate Smith, who I believe he scored his first goal last game, continue his goal scoring streak by scoring here in the 61st minute to tie RSL up. Then in the 78th minute, Danny Houston, another guy that hasn't scored a goal for the Quakes in a while, was able to score here to give the Quakes a 2-1 lead. But then Corey Bear in the 85th minute would tie the game up, and you just think, is this going to be that sort of game for the Quakes again, where they had a chance to win the match and they only let it slip away in the last couple of minutes of this game? And in some way, I was expecting that RSL was going to get this next goal, and it's going to be like the Seattle match all over again, where the Quakes are going to suffer a heartbreaker. But instead, for once, that was not the case. In fact, it was the opposite, where the Quakes kind of showed that never say die mentality that they had earlier in their second incarnation into this league. Because in the 93rd minute, Vaco would score to give the Quakes a 3-2 lead, and that was really the last kick of the game. I mean, this game was destined to go to a 2-2 draw, but Vaco somehow, in some way, was able to get the winning goal in this game as the Quakes. Big victory on the road against RSL, and probably something that I won't get to say a lot this season, because knowing the Quakes, whenever they get a big victory on the road, that will probably be the only big victory that they're going to get on the road. And as for RSL, you know, yeah, this is a bad week for RSL, and you just hope that with them suffering that gut-wrenching loss against Minnesota, and now suffering another gut-wrenching loss to one of the worst team in the league, is not going to trigger a downward spiral where they can quickly drop the Western Conference. Because unlike in the Eastern Conference, in the Western Conference, if you're not going to be consistent and you're going to go through a downward spiral, it's going to show in the standings, and you're going to drop down the table. But that being said, moving on into the final match of this week, and to save the best for last, it's the Cascadia derby between the Portland Timbers and the Seattle Sounders, where in this game the Sounders were able to walk away with a 3-1 victory, and this was a very Portland Timbers-like kind of game, and that in some way you could say that this game summarized their season, especially when they're playing at home. Dario Zebarich would give Portland a 1-0 lead, and you think at that point, well, that's great that the Timbers have got the opening goal, but is this what we're going to see, where things are going to look terrible for the Timbers and they're going to go conservative? And the answer is yes. They went conservative again after getting this 1-0 lead, and unsurprisingly, the Sounders saw that conservatively and they absolutely punished the Timbers in the second half. But before the second half started, right on the stroke of halftime, Xavier Arriaga was able to get the equalizer, not from a corner. He actually was able to somehow find himself in the 18-yard box and kind of tapped it in. I mean, I was kind of surprised what was in the world he was doing in the 18-yard box there, but he was able to slot that one home and tie the game up at 1 apiece on the stroke of halftime. In the second half, the Sounders completely controlled the game, and it's shown on the scoreline, and it also shown the fact that they were able to score the next 2 goals. First from Nico Ladera, who scored an amazing free kick to give the Sounders a 2-1 lead, before Miguel Ibarra pretty much wrapped things up in the 90th minute as the Sounders, big win for them, and they also leapfrog RSL in the standing because of those 2 big wins that they had this week. And for the Portland Timbers, I mean, I don't know what else to say other than the fact that we've been seeing this pretty much almost every single week with them at home, and it's baffling why in the world can this team not realize that when you're up 1-0 at home, especially early in the game, that you don't take your foot off the gas and decided to just give up in the second half like that. Like, you knew, I think at this point, if you're a Timbers fan, if you see your team score the first goal, you know things are not going to go well, and that it's probably, I mean, they'll probably celebrate the goal, but they'll probably say, uh-oh, please don't tell me it's going to happen again where we're going to just completely collapse and be complacent and just give up unanswered goal in the second half to lose the game. It's just been happening all season long, and I just don't know how they keep doing this and what exactly they're going to have to fix in terms of this poor run of form that they had this season. But that being said, that is pretty much it for all the games that I've reviewed. I'm now going to switch the board one more time to look at the standings right now in the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference. Alrighty, so here is the standings after 12 weeks of simulated match, and we start off in the Eastern Conference, where there is started to be a little bit more separation between 3rd through 12, where I always said that it's pretty much like a clusterfuck because of how tight it is, but it's not at a point where I said we started to kind of see a gap, and that it still seemed like a bunch of these teams are still kind of bunched up to each other. But we start off in first place with the Union being that top spot in the Eastern Conference at the moment with just 22 points. But they have Orlando City that is just breathing right down their neck and only 1 point behind them. And like I said, if Orlando City would have beat DC in this week matchup, they would have taken the top spot in the Eastern Conference. Then we start the clusterfuck with FC Cincinnati and Atlanta currently tied at 3rd place with 17 points. DC United with 15 points at 5th place. Then we have a freeway tie for 6th place between Toronto, New York Red Bulls, and NYCFC at 13 points. We got Montreal and Columbus tie at 9th place with 12 points. And then 11, we have New England at 11th place, or at 11 points. And the Chicago Fire, who is now dead last in the Eastern Conference with 10 points. And it just seemed like it's a musical chair when it comes to the last place of the Eastern Conference. Like, whereas in the Western Conference, we know for sure that who is going to be in dead last in the Western Conference, which is the Vancouver Whitecaps. The Eastern Conference, it's pretty much just kind of a rotation between all these bottom feeder teams that one day it's going to be theirs turn to be in the last, and then the very next week it's going to be their turn to be in the last. So it's kind of fun to see how it's a little bit of musical chair going on in terms of the bottom spot of the Eastern Conference. But in the Western Conference, we have Minnesota, who is pretty much in their league of their own at 35 points. Then in second place, we have the Seattle Sounders overtaking RSL after Seattle was able to get 2 big victories, while RSL, of course, suffered that loss, suffered 2 big loss this week. Dropped down to third place with Seattle currently have 25 points and RSL have 24 points. The Rapids are not far behind them with 20 points. Then we got Sporting KC, who is still charging up. Albeit, they're a little bit slower to charging up because they're in a very competitive Western Conference. They're literally there in terms of touching the top part of the Western Conference. Only 1 point behind Colorado. But that being said, the Galaxy are also in that same position, just 1 point behind the Rapids for that top spot and that last home playoff spot in the Western Conference. Then you got LAFC, who, as I said, they have been struggling so much that it has started to really reflect on the standings, where they're just barely above the playoff line with 17 points. Then you follow by the 2 Texas teams, FC Dallas and Houston, with Dallas currently at 15 points and the Dunamo currently with 12 points. Then at 10th and 11th place, we got the Portland Timbers and the San Jose Earthquakes with 10 points apiece. And as I mentioned before, the Vancouver Whitecaps, who didn't play this week, and because they didn't play this week, it pretty much just affect the fact that they're still at the bottom of the Western Conference, and they're still the only team in the entire league to not have double-digit point heading into this week. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for the standings and the review for this week's action. No doubt, I think this is probably the most interesting week because, you know, anytime when it's Heniken rivalry week, there's always going to be some interesting match. But there's also some rivalry match on top of some match that was very entertaining to watch, and we also have the game of the year happening this week. But that being said, I hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.